Welcome to Lenapehokink and the stories of the Lenape and their lands. So my name is Ruth Ann Purchase. I am living and working in the Lenape Indian Tribe of Delaware Federal Census District. I do cultural mapping work and recruit and supervise student interns to facilitate cultural mapping of the Lenape diaspora. Dolores Stanford is Nanacoke from the Millsboro, Delaware, and Connie DiMolanta is Lumbee from North Carolina. They both grew up in Philadelphia, but relate to their tribal communities very strongly, and they're heading up the Native American House Alliance. Cannon Klein will also be with us shortly. He is a senior in high school at Milford, Delaware, a citizen of the Lenape Indian Tribe of Delaware, and a dancer and singer and drummer and artist, and plays lacrosse. A stunning young man on his way to Cornell University to major in earth and atmospheric science. So we're very excited to have all these guests with us. We also have video clips of Chief Quiet Thunder and Chief Coker. Chief Quiet Thunder is of the Bridgeton Lenape in New Jersey, and Chief Coker is of the Cheswold Lenape. So we are grateful that all these wonderful voices have come together today because of the Mural Arts program. Thank you for bringing us together. And there are quite a few other elders on the phone we'll introduce later. Lenapehokink, Hakesanasipu Paseyank. This is the land of Lenape, where we live and breathe and relate to all living things. Lenapehokink is encompassing the Delaware and Hudson River valleys historically. That is the footprint of the language group. And I'd like to show us a film right now about how important it is to say where we are and who the original people are. This is a very short clip.
Wherever I go on God's green earth, I do the Lakota tradition of acknowledging the four directions, the land, and the people living there. Unchimaka, as I call Grandmother Earth, the land, I view her as a sacred, living entity, and that's the way we acknowledge it in, Lakota thought and philosophy.
As a Native person, I'm ready for any kind of confrontation that might come up, or I'm preparing myself to remind people of all those things that they forget about. We are still here! I was at a meeting in Minneapolis, and the room was primarily non-Native people. I was in a non-Native organization, but this executive director got up and said, okay, we're gonna get started. So everybody, was sitting down and getting quiet, and she said, I'd like to get started by acknowledging the indigenous culture of Minnesota. And I was like, whoa. And it just made everything fall away a little bit from me. My guard went down, I was more relaxed. Because by saying that, that means she understands something that is just you can't talk about, right? It just relaxed me as a minority, as a woman, and as a Native person. It just pulled away this layer that's always there, It was super cool.
We're at a time where non-Native cultures are understanding the traditions of indigenous peoples for probably the first time in our histories. So when I go to New Zealand, the protocol is to acknowledge each other's ancestors and your mountains and your rivers. And that's such a beautiful tradition. When people are in that space and say, we acknowledge who you are, this land, where your people come from, they're saying we acknowledge a relationship, but we're also creating that relationship. This is a good thing.
The important thing would be that folks would then sit with that. What does it mean that our settlement is occupying this space? And what responsibility do I have considering that legacy to these contemporary things, right? And how do I stop distancing myself from that? Ideally, that would be, for me, the impact that this has.
If you start acknowledging that the land that you're standing on and the space that you are in belong to people that are still here, makes so much more room for understanding of all these other issues. It's one of those little things that if it could just tip a little bit, all the dominoes that could fall from it, I think are important.
Okay, thank you so much. Could we go back to the slideshow? This slide I'm not going to talk about because it's too incredible, too many wonderful things. But my point here is all the Lenape stories, many of the Lenape stories are about change, about environmental change, about relationships with humans and the environment. There's much to learn from the ancestry of the original people here. So the Wallamolam is the oldest book on the North American continent. It's an epic poem like Beowulf, and it documents 500 generations of Lenape chiefs. Some people say it's just a legend, and that's fine. It's very informative, and science is confirming much of what it says. There are various interpretations, but we can get into that another day. There's a beautiful video right here on the back of a turtle, and it's cued so that you can see in like a minute and 30 seconds, an amazing way to understand that Mother Nature is a healthcare system, and we are part of that healthy system. And these ancient teachings, the original teachings of living together well, can inform our resilience and our restoration of all living things. The wampum belts are an agreement. And one of the biggest stories we want to talk about today in this section is agreements that Europeans and Native Americans made to live together well. And the assumption on the part of Native Americans from the video that you will see when you click on that is that Native Americans' assumption was that we were learning to live together well, and this agreement documented it. Europeans were thinking, I bought something I now own and can do whatever I want with disrespectfully. Like at that time, they owned women and they owned people of color. They could own their Mother Earth. Native Americans could not comprehend that. So this video is very informative. And I'm going to fly quickly through this lovely one, but we want to introduce one of the most ancient relatives. All living things are relatives in this worldview. And the sturgeon is over like 240 million years old, documented by fossils. He is prehistoric. His back is armored, and he flips over. This is so brilliant. He flips over and smacks like a back flap instead of a belly flop. He smacks the water just at dawn and dusk. He's calling all his relations to come back together. And he'll do this until a crowd forms and they travel together. They are a community, and they are a resilient community. And they have always been here in the Delaware River Valley or Hakasinissipu, Paseank, but we've forgotten to protect their ancient breeding ground. And the Lenape were documented as the first environmental advocates, nonviolent, direct action, taking down the colonists' dams to let their ancestors get upstream for the family reunion at the vernal equinox. How cool is that story? We have documentation of so many of these aspects of life and of Native American advocacy. This is not new, and pandemics are not new. 90% of the Lenape were dead within the first 100 years of European contact, mainly due to a smallpox epidemic every 15 years, killing the elders and killing the babies. So these sufferings are not new. And the resilience of the indigenous people of Turtle Island is not new. And we can listen to their deep wisdom. I'm going to ask Dolores and Cornelia to share a little bit, and feel free to pick and choose what you share. Just feel free for like the next 4 or 5 minutes.
First of all, my name is Cornelia de Malenta, and I'm with Dolores Stanford. We want to talk for a moment about our
organization. We're Native American House Alliance. It is an urban nonprofit that we promote and general welfare of Native Americans in the Philadelphia area. There is a growing need for social services among the Native American community in Philadelphia area. There are over 6,000 Native Americans living in the Philadelphia area, and many with no ties to their culture or their tribe. We will strive to preserve and protect Native American history and culture, as well as conserve and protect Native American sites and places.
We are located right in front of Penn Treaty Park at Penn Treaty Park Place, for anyone who wants to know. But while we're on the subject, let's talk about Penn Treaty Park itself and the erosion that's taking place. You know, we're here as Native American people. We need to try to heal Mother Earth by finding ways to stop the pollution and the effects of killing all the animals who play a big part in our ecosystem. Penn Treaty Park right now has gone through some changes, but there's still a lot of things that are wrong. Now, let's talk about this plaque that's up that says Penn Treaty Park. You know, William Penn was a refugee of war, and all the others who sailed with him that came from England, they were refugees of war. And the Quakers, they were Quakers, and the King of England actually gave them Pennsylvania to get rid of them. Now, they came here and they met with the Lenapes and they met with Tanneman and they formed their treaties, and they came to a treaty to live in peace and to be peaceful. And that treaty was made under that great elm tree that is no longer there. And they never even mark it as the village of Shakabaxon, which they should. The thing that bothers me most is that there are 577 tribes here in the United States, and not one thing that says Penn Treaty Park there says William Penn and the Indians made a treaty. Why does it not say the Lenapes? Why does it not name the Chief Tanneman? And I believe that they need to change the Indian to Native Americans, because now when you say you're Indian, they think you're from India. And India did not make that treaty with William Penn. The Native Americans, the Lenapes, they welcomed William Penn into their family. And they made him a family member. They made his family members their family. And to look at the injustice now and the things that are being done there at Penn Treaty Park, if it really is historical, why can't it truly be marked as a historical place and name the Indians that wrote the treaty with William Penn? Say they were Lenapes. Put Chief Tanneman's name in there. There's no statues of Native Americans there at all. All the erosion and stuff that's taking place over there, they say that the beavers are coming back and they're starting to chew up the trees over there, and they're having a problem with that, and they shouldn't have a problem with that, because it's just saying that the river, and it's better for the wildlife that's around there. It's better for the fish. I think that has to do with Petty Island, because it was once owned by Citgo Oil. And when they stopped all of that, I think that it started cleaning up the Delaware River some.
All right, so this is Penn Treaty Park here. It's the green, tiny little green peninsula that sticks out. And Dolores told me that she remembers when that was a much bigger piece of land. And from the up close picture, you can see those big rocks, those big boulders. They put them there because the water is just eroding.
Taking place.
Yeah.
Right.
And now the elders can't get down there. We have people who come there from all over the world, especially on World Water Day, and they bring a sample of water from their homelands. A lot of people in Philadelphia from all over the world, and they all bring water from there wherever they can get it, and they're important places, and they bring it to this water, this city of Philadelphia, the brotherly love. And those elderly women try to get down to that water through those rocks to put their water into the Delaware Bay and allow it to become a part of the whole. It's been so hard to see these big rocks, and yet we know they're trying to prevent erosion. Is that even possible? You know, so now I don't know if Cannon's on yet. Cannon, are you on here yet? Cannon, can you speak to this a little bit? Everybody say hello to Cannon.
Thank you. I'm Cannon Khan, and as we're talking about climate justice in Lenapehokink, we have to ask the questions: what are Lenape losing? What is possible to restore? To whom it can be restored? And what barriers can we remove? so that it's more possible and easier to revitalize our climate. So when we talk about what the Lenape are losing, it boils down to we're losing our lands, our cultural and our history, and we're also losing our ties to our animal relatives. And the bottom left is a picture from Woodland Beach, Delaware, like around Smyrna. And it's a picture of the road has been flooded. And so after the way at the little land that we have left. In the top right corner, that picture is of the Island Field site in Slaughter Beach, Delaware. And that's a very historic burial ground for my tribe. And it's a very important cultural place and tells us a lot about our history. And as you can see, it's right off the bay there, and it's very close to being submerged in water if the sea level rises anymore, which would be a shame because it's a very important part of our culture and our history. Another thing that we're losing is our connection to our animal relatives, like fish and seafood in the bay that are being threatened and endangered from climate change and pollutants, which are traditionally a source of food and a means of income for Lenape people.
In response to all these struggles, we are restoring local food. We believe that local food, localization in general, is the best thing we can do to reduce our carbon footprint and slow climate change, which is accelerating. We have a cultural mapping program, and if you get to look at this slideshow, please click on cultural mapping and scroll down. You'll see all kinds of articles about what we're doing, workshops that you can take regarding restoring indigenous lifeways.
Man did not spin the web of life. He's merely a strand in it. And what man does to the web, he does to himself. I think it's very important to view our society in that relationship. And we're here in the Fork Branch area of our tribal community, where we're trying to restore the ecosystem here with the expectation of reintroducing the freshwater mussel. The freshwater mussel certainly is a primary health indicator of water quality. So that if we can get a freshwater mussel to grow out here, then it's a sign that our waters are improving in health.
Wanishita, thank you all. So this is my farewell slide. I want to thank everyone who participated. I'm so excited to see how this all unpacks and how we learn to live together well in Lenapehokink with all our relations. Thank you, everyone.